presence too, and as the inaugural class of this public service concept of the presidents, we are so honored to have it here in Little Rock, to have it as part of the Presidential Center, have all you great young minds that are truly going to be the future of our community and communities of the world. And it's great to have you right here in Little Rock. And it's also tremendously wonderful because of the, I'll say, the significance of individuals who are coming to visit the city and make presentations or have some interchange with this class. And especially to have the ambassador here, we are honored to have him back home. And when I think about Little Rock, and I was asking him a moment ago, I said, does the city, has it kind of changed a little bit since you were last here? And he said, oh man, dramatically. And so I hope you'll have the opportunity to visit a lot of parts of the city during your short stay here, and that there will be occasions when you'll come back in the future on for other events. But that said, I have to slip on to a funeral that starts at 11, or I'd probably be sticking around trying to listen to some of this beautiful message I'm sure he'll deliver this morning. But as a city of diversity, as a city with a lot of its own struggles dealing with racism and racial conflict, and as a city that's trying to build bridges to fit the same spirit that President Clinton did while he was president, and he continues to do even after his presidency, I know that this man is of that same mold and of that same spirit, and it's such a great honor to have him back home. And one of the few things that mayors have the ability to do is to, in a way of saying welcome, is to present a key to the city. So, Mr. Ambassador, it is my privilege to present to Ambassador Koby Koomson on this day, November the 4th. It is the 4th, but it's tomorrow. Yes, it is. For some reason, I thought, I'm losing my days, and I thought, wait a minute, I think tomorrow's the 4th. But from myself, Jim Daly, as mayor, and the Little Rock Board of Directors, this key to the city of Little Rock. And what it means, and I'm sure you're already doing this, is that we welcome you, we open our doors to you, and that we hope that as you travel the world and you go back to other places, you'll always say good things about Little Rock. So,
Mr. Mayor, thank you. Thank you so very much, Mr. Mayor, for this honor. I have goosebumps all over my body. Never in my wildest dreams, in my wildest imagination, did I ever expect to be in a position like this. From the time I arrived in Little Rock, Arkansas in February 1975, and the path that this great city has taken me through, and the kind of training and education that this great city, and indeed the great school of ULR, has been so blessed to have. But this indeed is humbling, Mr. Mayor. I graciously accept this on behalf of myself, my family, indeed, in an unofficial manner, all the people of Ghana, indeed the President of Ghana. You honor me, you honor my country. You honor me, you honor the people that sent me to Washington, and indeed you honor me, you honor the alumni and the future students that will come through UAL. I thank you very much, and I'm hoping that through my little efforts, I will be in a position to work with you and your office to plan a trip to Ghana. I will be delighted to make all the necessary arrangements and communicate that to the appropriate authorities in Ghana for us to, in a small way, to show our appreciation for what the city has done for me and what the great school has done for me. But thank you very much, Mr. Mayor, from the bottom of my heart.
well, and now it is I who have the goosebumps. So,
Ambassador Koomson served as the ambassador from Ghana to the United States from 1997 to 2001. On his agenda are things like technology, economy, empowerment of women, things that are hard fought in his country and in many of the countries in Africa. He and I had a very interesting discussion last night, and I am sure that you will have a wonderful discussion with him today. The format is going to be about a 10 to 15-minute presentation by him, kind of an overview of his country, and then the rest of the time up till noon, he will be engaged in conversation with you. As I understand from Dr. Bruce and from Dean Pryor, he really wants you all to be involved in asking questions and to really have a conversation about things that matter to you, things that matter to him. He's very interested in facilitating relationships with the United States. That is what his business is now as a consultant in Washington, D.C., where he is based. So I give to you Ambassador Koby Koomson. You all enjoy him. Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, I want all of you to really give Mary a much warmer round of applause for the representation of the Alumni Association and for what she has done in really getting me to come to Little Rock today, but yesterday to receive the distinguished award. Please join me in I think this is, if you don't mind, I will be a little bit less diplomatic, if you don't mind, take off my jacket so that you can feel the comfort level, in the exchange that we will have this morning. Generally, the environment around diplomats is that, they're very structured and they're very proper, but you're talking to one who is one of you, sat in the chair where you're sitting, perhaps not in this building, but at ULI, many of the halls, from Stabler Hall to all the other halls, at ULI. So I want you to feel comfortable in this exchange. There are a couple of individuals here who've had the opportunity to visit Ghana in various capacities. So you have to know that I'm not the only one who has the knowledge of Ghana, but I do have two individuals here who will, perhaps if I don't, come across the proper way, they may help me in coming across the proper way because of the time they spent in West Africa and indeed in Ghana. Ghana had its independence in 1957. Prior to that, it was on a colonial role, which was Britain. Britain was the colonial masters until 1957. And in 1957, under the leadership of our first president, Dr. Kwame Nkrumah, we gained independence. Ghana became the first country in Africa to gain independence from colonial rule. And of course, since then, you have the mushrooming of other countries that followed, that to the extent that up to until today, there is not a single country on the continent under colonial rule. So we did chart the course, we did lead the path on the continent of Africa to gain independence and have self-rule. The country has a population of about 20 million people. And it is, in our opinion, really the center of the world. It is 6 degrees from the equator, and the Greenwich Meridian, which is the zero meridian that runs through the world, runs directly through Ghana. So as you can tell, there's no other country in the world that can boast of being the real center of the world other than Ghana. But in addition to that, this is a country that has by far the most hospitable people that one can come across in the entire world. Perhaps followed by Arkansas. And please, you have to forgive my prejudicial, tendencies in looking at my country that way. But I will tell you, when I arrived in Little Rock in 1975, I immediately felt the southern hospitality, which was very similar to the kind of hospitality I had left behind in Ghana. Prior to coming to Little Rock, I spent 6 months in Los Angeles. And I'm sure you can imagine the shock and sometimes the impersonal relationships that one has, in a larger city like Los Angeles, for that matter, the state of California. So when I left Los Angeles in February 1975 to come to Little Rock, immediately I found myself at home. And that's why I stayed here for 10 years until I left and went back to Los Angeles and subsequently went to Washington to represent my country as the ambassador. The political system in Ghana, since independence, we've gone through some turbulent times. We've had constitutional rule, we've had military rule. For most part, the military rule that spanned from 1966 until 1981. Since then, we've enjoyed, and what we enjoy now is the constitutional rule of Ghana beginning in 1992. In 1992, the country went into the fourth constitutional rule, fourth governance of constitutional rule in the country. And it followed a military rule that lasted from 1981 until 1992. We've had two different governments since 1992. First was the NDC, which was headed by President Rawlings, that lasted until the year 2000. And in our constitutional rule, the president and members of parliament they are elected every 4 years. So 92, 96, the then ruling government won re-election, and then in 2000, we had a new ruling party come into being, and that is the new ruling party being the NPP. That is still the ruling party in the country. They came into power in 2000. NDC lost the election and NPP came in. And they've been there since 2000. They won re-election in 2004. The country is governed by an executive branch. The system of administration we have in the country is so that we have an executive branch, which is the presidency and the vice presidency, very much modeled after the American way, the American system of governance. And then we have a parliament, which is modeled after the British system. And then we have the judiciary, which really is more akin to the British system because of the long relationship that we've had with Britain, and even then since independence. And the three branches of government are very independent. Of course, we know that there's always the coziness, between when you have the majority in parliament, you get most of your agenda carried through. That's how it's supposed to be. But we have a 200-member parliament in Ghana. We have the members of parliament can also become cabinet members. Unlike here, where members of Congress, if you are appointed as a cabinet member, you have to give up the opposition in Congress and you serve the president. In our system, if the president appoints you as a cabinet member and you're a member of parliament, you still hold your designation and your responsibilities as a member of parliament, so you have dual role. And it's often fashioned after the British system. So we took the best of America, we took the best of Europe, we took the best of our own traditional tendencies, and we put them together to create a system that works best for us. We also have, in addition to the three areas of government, we also have what we call a body of very well knowledgeable individuals. These are, it's a council that the president appoints. He has an option to appoint a certain number, and a certain number are also selected by or presented by the various in the country, not like a country. This council advises the president on matters that are very crucial to the nation. And they don't have real powers in terms of setting policy. They are in an advisory capacity, but they wield a lot of influence because they're selected from among businessmen, they're selected from among the chieftaincy system in the country. And as I said, we took the best of America, the best of England, and the best of what we had, which in this case, we resorted to the chieftaincy in the country and involved a selection, a segment of the chieftaincy system in our current system of governance. And they are in a position to advise the president, and the president consults with them in certain key appointments and in certain important issues that affect the country. Economically, our principal commodity has always been cocoa. Ghana used to be the #1 cocoa producing country in the world. Now, I think we are second to or third to Brazil and Cote d'Ivoire. But for a long time, we were the #1 producers of cocoa. Our cocoa has the richest texture among all the cocoa producing countries in the world. And that's why most chocolate manufacturers tend to use a small portion of Ghana's cocoa to add to cocoa that they get from Brazil and Cote d'Ivoire and other cocoa producing countries to make the chocolate that we eat, because ours is the richest in the world. We also have timber. And among the agricultural programs that we have developed an aggressive system to produce pineapple. Ghana produces some of the best pineapple that is actually being sold in Europe. We are working aggressively, and we've had some successes, some challenges in trying to get the pineapple that we produce to America. But we also understand the competition. But our pineapple is actually being sold in the best restaurants, in the best stores in Europe, because of the texture, because of the sugar content, and because of the size. In the minerals area, Ghana, as I said, used to be called the Gold Coast. The country, we believe, is really dotted with several gold deposits. And we're beginning to explore and also find more gold reserves. Gold is our #1 commodity, mineral that we produce, followed by diamond, followed by bauxite and manganese. These are the key 4 minerals that we produce. We also have others, but these are the 4 key minerals that we produce: cocoa, bauxite, diamond, and manganese. There is also the non-formal agricultural sector that the country is trying to promote, things like cassava. But the country is primarily an agricultural country. We don't have oil, at least none of any substantial quantity that the country can boast of. We've always said that God put lots of oil in Nigeria and put gas in Cote d'Ivoire, and we sandwich in between the 2 countries. Somehow God said, well, we'll give you guys the intellect to make sure that you manage the affairs of the continent. We're still negotiating with God to maybe help us find oil, and I pray and hope that one of these days, technology will yield that some of the oil in these 2 countries and beyond have somehow found their way through the shift of plates in the earth's crusted to shift some of the oil and gas to Ghana. We hope that happens sometime soon. But educational system in the country because of our limited resources. And we know that if you're based on an agricultural country, your economy is greatly dependent on those who set the prices at the world market. We don't set the cocoa prices, and as a result, if cocoa prices fall, we are at the mercy of the rest of the world, in particular the developed countries. It creates a unique opportunity for you and I to really look into the challenges that face Africa, and for that matter Ghana, with respect to being an agricultural country. That the opportunities that the entire agricultural system offers, such as value added, because we ship our cocoa raw to Europe, to the major chocolate manufacturing companies. Of course, we have a chocolate factory, but not of the kind that one finds when one tastes Sears or Godiva's or Cadbury. And so it provides tremendous opportunity for American businesses to look into the source of this rich chocolate that can be made into very rich and what I call sought after chocolate. We know all the health implications of chocolate. It provides also unique opportunity in the area of the marketing of our commodities, to the extent that all these things are in its infancy. We marvel at President Clinton having signed the AGOA, which is the Africa Growth and Opportunity Act, which is called the Africa Trade Bill between the African countries and the US in 2000. And this bill is designed for American companies to take maximum advantage of what we produce in Africa, which oftentimes is agricultural raw materials. Very few countries in Africa, you can literally count them on both fingers, on both hands, produce oil. The total number of countries in Africa, I believe, is somewhere around 53. And less than a dozen countries really produce oil of any sizable quantity. So you can imagine that our agriculture really creates a tremendous opportunity on the continent, for that matter, for my country, Ghana. Let me move on, because I understand I have 15 minutes to speak, and then I'll give you guys the opportunity to ask all the questions in areas that I may not have covered. Our educational system is modeled after the British system. We have, until perhaps a decade or so ago, we had the basic primary, the middle school, the secondary school, and the universities, very much modeled after the British system. We took the same exam as the British students took. And it was not just only Ghana, but Sierra Leone, Ghana, Nigeria, and Gambia, the 4 British colonies in West Africa, which took the same exams, those are the exams I took when I was in school. We've changed to a new system that is designed to accommodate our needs now. Because if you couldn't go to secondary school after a competitive exam, then where do you go? No skill sets, so you end up becoming a burden on the state. We don't have a social security system where the government will pay people who are not employed or who cannot fend for themselves. You have to fend for yourself. But the new system is designed to absorb the kids who couldn't get admission to the university or to the senior secondary schools into areas where they can get into some crafts that can become very useful, and you can go into business for yourself as you grow up. We still have the basic primary. Then from there you do the junior secondary school for 3 years, and the senior secondary school also for 3 years before you go to university. So 6 years basic education, elementary school, then junior secondary for 3 years, and then a senior secondary for additional 3 years, making a total of 12 years, which is what American school kids, have to go through before they get admission to go to university. And so far, it's working for us. What I like to do is I will pause here and give you the opportunity, because I look at the clock, and give you the opportunity to ask questions in the area that doesn't limit us to anything. Questions on Ghana, questions on Africa. I will have talked about the debt, but I had certain parameters that I was supposed to discuss. So I will open the floor, and any question that you wish to ask, I'll be delighted to discuss them with you. Yes.
Good morning, Mr. Ambassador. My name is Malcolm Glover. I'm a student here at the Clinton School from Bowie, Maryland. I wanted you to talk a little more about what you worked on in terms of women's rights issues in Ghana. We heard a little bit about that earlier. I was wondering if you could expound upon that.
Thank you. Thank you very much, sir. It's an area that comes very close to heart. We have in the country about 52% of our people are women. And sadly enough, from the time of independence until perhaps maybe a decade, 2 decades ago, the idea of educating women was not really a priority because, one, family demands, two, the male child was more inclined to go to school, or the family would send a male child to school more so than the female child. That has changed tremendously now. But then we are getting the vestiges, the results of not having educated a whole segment of the society. We're talking 50 to 70 to 80 years ago. When I became ambassador, I made that one of the key areas that I was going to focus on. First, in the area of assisting our girls in getting admission to U.S. universities. And then focusing on providing the necessary environment for our women entrepreneurs to compete, but then also to have the necessary wherewithal and the opportunities as their male counterparts. So we invited the women organizations, whether they were women entrepreneurs, when we invited the National Association of Realtors, we made sure that there were women entrepreneurs involved. And I placed a specific emphasis and special interest in really engaging the women among the groups that will come from Ghana. What I'm doing now is I am working with the largest women entrepreneurial group in Ghana called GAWE, Ghanaian Association of Women Entrepreneurs. And my efforts are to link them up with U.S. women entrepreneurs. And I'm not talking about anyone carrying a business card. I'm talking about looking at the Ghanaian contractors who are women. Because I don't believe that you can turn an economy around by giving $200 in a microfinancing system to someone, who made baskets. There's no economy in the world that has been turned around and made into a robust economy by giving $500 in microfinancing. And the emphasis that we're placing on now is targeting those women who are computer engineers who form their own businesses that can take advantage of the information technology revolution on a global scale, and linking them up with counterparts in the U.S. and indeed we'll also look, on the larger global scene. Women who own transportation businesses that can take advantage of our booming tourism business. Women who are have various skill sets that can compete for either government contracts by having counterparts here
who can provide them with the necessary wherewithal, doing medicine acquisitions, but particularly doing joint ventures between American women entrepreneurs and the Ghanaian women entrepreneurs. We are also aggressively, as part of the program that we've discussed with Galway, to have them to have access to capital. The biggest problem that faces African for most businesses, whether male or female, is that there's not enough money in the system. That's why most banks in Africa charge 28% interest. Can you believe that? You want to borrow money? 25, 28% interest. And that's their best customers. Now, you can imagine if all these years not that many women have been privileged to become entrepreneurs and successful entrepreneurs, that means that they cannot even enter into the building that is called a bank or financial institution. And if we change that, if we can change that, we will have moved a society, an entire economy, from where it is now to a level that can begin to compete and create a better lifestyle for the people. So it's an area that is very, very important to me. I've had discussions with folks in Indiana. I have discussions last night with some of the faculty that I met, Dr. Belcher, and another assistant vice president. Thank you so very much. Last night at dinner, as part of the program that we pursue now aggressively, and I will encourage you, to assist in any way possible to make this a reality, because if we can change the mindset of 52% of our population that depend on subsistence lifestyle and move them to a competitive global business, women manage the money better. I believe that I may be prejudicial to that because of the children they have. They've been inclined to manage the business better, to manage the money better, and the repayment rate among the women entrepreneurs in Ghana is about 90%. It doesn't get any better than that. The whole idea is to give them the environment to move them from the subsistence level of funding to a more robust environment where they can have relationship with their counterparts here and learn from them and exchange ideas and trade with them. So it's an area that is it's of utmost importance. It's really one of probably by far my top priority, in my endeavors, now. Yes.
Good morning, Ambassador. I'm April Winningham. I'm in the Department of Health Sciences over at UALR. On behalf of myself and my students that are here today, we were very excited about this opportunity. My question is related to HIV and AIDS. That's my research area in terms of prevention. I was wondering if you could share with us where HIV AIDS stands in your country and in terms of the health care that you are able to provide to those folks.
Thank you. Thank you so very much. And I'm delighted that you're here with your students. And indeed, if I did not recognize any of the professors or any of the instructors, my apologies. There's a slight lapse in my presentation earlier. But thank you so very much for you being here. We know the problem associated with HIV/AIDS and its implications in Africa. In some countries, it's about 25% of the people are deemed to have HIV/AIDS, and you can imagine a quarter of your population having that. That's a catastrophe. In Ghana, at the time when this problem was being discussed, the government embarked on an aggressive educational mechanism, educating the city folks, educating the rural areas. 67% of our people live in the rural areas. And
we use our own system of advertising, our own system of introducing the message and the dangers of HIV/AIDS to our society. We didn't have the Fifth Avenue, Wall Street, type of advertising, but we used our own system, and it was effective. I believe we've enjoyed an HIV/AIDS threshold lower than what is considered to be a serious problem in the country, and I believe it's like 4 or 5%. We've always been below that number. I don't know what the current number is but for a long time, we were below the threshold. It still doesn't excuse the fact that the problem exists in the country, because if one person has it, that's one person too many. The problem associated with that, and I will not go into how it started and all of this, the issue is, it is a pandemic that we have now, and the appeal that I think we should all make to those who have the wherewithal and to the pharmaceutical companies, and when we make no apologies. If half of the people of the world die, who are they going to sell their medicines to? Who are they going to sell microwaves to? Who are they going to sell refrigerators to? Who are they going to sell clothing to? It's an appeal that has to be made to those who have the wherewithal are in position with policy, in positions with wealth, to really support the research and to support the management, in addition to the research, the management of the problem in, say, Ghana, or in Botswana, or South Africa, or any other country in Africa, for that matter, globally, because we're all one people. That the affordability of someone in the village to buy a cocktail of HIV drugs, you cannot imagine it. The average day wage for a whole day's work officially in Ghana is about $1.10. It's about $1.10. In some villages, it's 50 cents. Where is the person going to get $6 or $30 total cocktail to help fight this disease? And it's an issue of really appealing to those who have the wherewithal, those who are in policy. I mean, this is a humanity issue. It is not an issue of black, white, rich, poor, of I have it, you don't have it. It's a humanity issue that must be addressed from a very comprehensive manner. But as I said, if you lose a quarter of the world, we're going to market to. Unless you say, well, I still have 75%, and I still can sell to them, but it's a humanity issue. And back home, the country has made an aggressive effort to really address the issue through education, through management. Because not only the cocktail, my wife is a physician, and she worked with the Clinton White House when they were putting together the HIV/AIDS program for Africa. And it was with great success. But we have to have the total, global effort through the UN, through our legislators, through the business world, to have the necessary wherewithal. Because the countries cannot afford, what it takes to manage this illness. I mean, we're talking about bird flu. It can be a problem, but we are faced with a major catastrophe that is creating orphans, it's creating widowers and widows around the world. In addition to HIV/AIDS in the area of health, you also have the problem of malaria. Malaria adversely impacts the economic activity of every African country more than any illness. It kills more people than any illness. And it's a preventable disease. It's a preventable disease. I mean, one gets, takes relief when one hears that there are benevolent individuals like Bill Gates and others who are committing money but we have to do more. To whom much is given, much is expected. We can't go to the guy in the village or the guy, in the rural area of whether Arkansas or Washington or Seattle and say, well, come in for a fundraiser. Those who have more must give more. It's just as simple as that. Because it's a global issue. And if we did that, we will arrest all the diseases in the world, including the ones, because what happens is when you create an environment where you give people the ability to do well, they can manage their health. They will not do the things that will get them into difficult health situations. And when one talks about the issue of HIV/AIDS, I honestly believe that we have not done enough. When I was at the embassy, my last year in office, I worked with the US Exim Bank that came out with the first pronouncement that we were going to ask corporate America and the pharmaceutical companies to discount the medicines that they sell to Africa by 90%. I worked with Mr. Hammond, then the president and chairman and CEO of US Exim Bank, because it was the right thing to do. But then still, when you take 90% discount, you have 10% of a total cocktail of what? Of $30 or $20, the guy is making less than $1 a day. Back then. Where's he going to get the money? Now, if he uses the money to buy the medicine, he hasn't fed the family. Like his education have not been paid. So that becomes a vicious cycle. So what's more important, feed my child or buy the cocktail medicine? And don't even talk to me about going to the clinic or going to a place to get advice. These are the issues that it's a total management issue. A total comprehensive issue that must be addressed to deal with this pandemic.
Mr. Nestor, my name is Vivian Flowers. I'm an inaugural student here at the school. And I am interested in hearing a little bit more about the governance of Ghana, and that's kind of my area of focus, their elections, and I'd like to hear more about that in your country. And let me also add that I'm interested in going to Africa for my internship. So if you would keep that in mind as you actually
I will take the second one first. I think with any plans to go to Africa, I think you should go to Ghana. And I'd be more than glad to assist. And indeed, the same. I will extend the same invitation to all of you, to take the opportunity to visit Ghana. Hopefully, before you finish your program here, or shortly after you finish your program here, you go there and you write and you call your friends and say, I think I'm going to stay a little longer. Then you come back and you say, Mr. Ambassador, I cannot believe I've not been to this place all these years. The system of governance we have in the country, one, we pride ourselves on being one of the most stable countries, not only in Africa, but in the world. When I was ambassador, I'll go to a place and I'll hear, oh, Ghana is doing well, Ghana is doing well. Oftentimes when they talk about Ghana is doing well, they talk about Ghana is doing well when they compare Ghana to other African countries. And we know that the index of growth, the index of all the various indices that one will use to judge a country, when you use that index and apply that to Africa, it's always a very low mark. So why compare yourself to a group that is getting low marks? And I will always compare Ghana to the global community, the more developed world, the more advanced world, because that's what you have to aspire to become. That we pride ourselves in being the most stable country in the world. Now, stability, creates confidence in the person who wants to come in, whether to do business, to visit, to engage in any capacity. That stability has been gained, it has been fought for, we've earned it through the system of government, which is the three areas of government being the judiciary, the legislative, and the executive. The executive has the president and the vice president that must run on the same ticket and belong to the same party. And when and if a person becomes successful in being elected president, that individual will hope that the members of parliament that he will be working with or she will be working with will be a majority from his party. We have a 200 member of parliament body, and members of cabinet are oftentimes selected from parliamentarians. As I said, modeled after the British system. We also have, let me backtrack a bit and talk about the members of parliament. The resources available to our members of parliament is not as extensive as the resources that members of Congress have. It has to do with money. If there's not enough money in the system, the members of parliament cannot have that many staff members who will do the research, who will gather the information to make the right decisions. So they have to do the best given what they have available. But they're still doing the best they can based on what they have available. And there is a very aggressive interaction in Parliament. You have the judiciary system. We have the various levels of justices, which ends with the Supreme Court of Ghana. And I believe the total number of justices, I may be mistaken on that, might be 9. I believe it might be 9, and the number may be 1 or 2, maybe higher than that. They're supposed to be independent. And of course, just like here, it is the prerogative of the president to appoint Supreme Court justices. And they're there for life. Our education system is such that Ghana has produced some of the brightest brains in the area of the judiciary. For some time, the Chief Justice of some African countries were Ghanaians. Ghanaian lawyers and Ghanaian justices, you find them in a number of African countries even today because of the very high level of education. As I said, we were bypassed with oil, so God said, I'll give the intellect, I'll put the intellect in Ghana. But other countries also have the same level of intellectuals. But we emphasize on education right after independence. So with the 3 branches of government, they're supposed to work hand in hand, but also be independent. And then, go ahead.
Well, I was just wondering, in those branches, what is it like in terms of diversity and service of women, young people? How is that?
Okay. It goes back to the question that the gentleman asked with respect to my involvement in women's empowerment. I don't think it's enough. The total number of women in Parliament out of 200, I don't think will exceed 40. In a country that's 52% women. I will get the exact number and I'll pass it on through Mary so that that information can be made available to this body of class. Within the governmental system, within the executive system, the members of cabinet, we do have about 5 or 6 cabinet members who are women. But I still say that that's not enough because we have enough competent women in the country that can do the same work as the men do. But remember, in our society, it's more male dominated. That gradually gradually, we're going to see a change. Because in 2000, when I was still at the embassy, I went home and I was looking at the report. At the university level, there were more females doing math, medicine, law, and the sciences. More female than men. There were more women who were in the area of mathematics, medicine, law, and other sciences, which is a major shift. And we need to see more of that. So in terms of the gender makeup, I don't think we have enough of that. Partly because, as I said, you create wealth has been created in the hands of men. Because they were the businessmen. The women were the housewives.
Like here.
So to the extent that when you begin to see more women academically being, challenging the system or participating more so, then you create a body of individuals that can begin to venture into the areas of governance. Who knows? I would hope that in my lifetime I'll see a woman president in Ghana. Because I believe the president is qualified. The president must be given the opportunity to govern, or to rule, or to manage a particular department. We also have the Council of State, which is the elders that the president appoints. There again, you have more male than men, because the chiefs are often male, and you have a family representation of our royal houses, of our chiefs, who serve as advisors that the president consults with for matters that are of utmost importance to the nation.
Good morning, Ambassador. I'm also an inaugural student here, and my name is Nancy Mencia. My question is with regards to the stability that your nation enjoys and how it's regarded by external investors as having relatively low political risk. That's in opposition to your neighbors who have experienced quite a lot of conflict over the past few years, and I'm wondering what role Ghana plays in influencing those neighboring states towards peaceful solutions, or with regards also as an agent to the international community on the ground there.
Thank you very much for that question. Ghana was instrumental in finding solution, a major player in finding solution to the Liberian problem. We saw the need, by virtue of proximity and being an island of stability, that where there's problems, the people, when they move from their countries, will move naturally into Ghana. And we receive people, we open our arms to them from as far away as Chad, as far away as Sudan. We've received, Africans who will come to Ghana. We never turn anybody away. From Liberia, from Sierra Leone. So it was very important for the Ghanaian government, both in the government that I served in and the current government, to address this issue of stability, to address the issue of conflict resolution in our sub-region. We were quite instrumental, very instrumental, in bringing the Liberian crisis to a close. We are actively engaging in the Côte d'Ivoire, which is our neighbors to the west. We were very involved in the recent crisis in Togo that eventually led to the election of a president. We've been involved in discussions and the resolution in the problem in both Chad and Sudan. Of course, we were actively involved during the Congo crisis as far back as since independence.
as far back as since independence. So we look at our immediate neighbors and the stability that the immediate neighbors must have, or the system of government that the immediate neighbors must have, as very crucial to our own survival. And we play an active role. We've played an active role in the past, and we continue to play an active role in the past, and even to today. Because we believe that if Cote d'Ivoire goes, if Liberia goes, if any of the countries in West Africa goes, we will become the recipient of that burden. And just imagine the adverse impact it will have on our economy. Our economy is only $8 billion a year. $8 billion a year. So you can imagine, if you take, with a total population of 20 million people, if you add, 500,000 more people to the system, you stretch our system to points where, we cannot imagine. So we've been very active participants. Both presidents, the former one, the current one, have been very, very involved in the resolution. They were very involved in the resolution of the Liberian crisis, which we all know was a major tragedy in West Africa. The Sierra Leone problem, and currently in the problem in Cote d'Ivoire. Oh, I answered the question.
Yes, I'm also wondering about the troops. I've heard a lot of times that troops from your country are helping with the peace keeping.
Yes, our peacekeeping efforts date as far back as the time in the Middle East. For a long time, a Ghanaian general was in charge of the entire UN. General Quinn was the one who was in charge of the UN peacekeeping in Lebanon. We've had excellent experience with respect to peacekeeping. That's why, with the problem in Liberia, we brought that experience in maintaining peace, in maintaining order, of course with stern, involvement in the country. Our next door neighbors, we cannot send peacekeepers into Cote d'Ivoire, nor could we have sent, peacekeepers into Togo at the time when the former president died. But we use our experience and the respect we have on the continent to influence the leadership now to resort to the kind of good governance where it is necessary for us to use our military. As limited as we have in terms of numbers and resources, we've never hesitated involving the Ghanaian, military in making sure that our neighbors and any African country that needs our help, is turned down. So we've been actively involved with respect to our military in Liberia, in Senegal, in Sierra Leone, and other African countries.
Morning, Ambassador. My name is Joe Ballard. I'm also a student at the school. There was a rumor or story that in 2003, in the case of Liberia and the Liberian Crisis, that Charles Taylor was in Ghana in 2003 in March. He was indicted by the special court. He was actually protected by the government and given free passage back to Liberia. Is that the case? And if so, can you explain the political situation where the government needed to protect Charles Taylor from prosecution, but was also actively seeking peace in Liberia?
I think Charles Taylor ended up in Nigeria.
Right, that's correct.
Yeah,
I think
he was given safe haven, in Nigeria. And that's discussion that took place, among the heads of government in giving him that safe haven. Of course, and other people have different opinions with respect to, full accountability, among our leaders. I'm a firm believer that no one should be above the law, and for that matter, once we institute strong and firm accountability, among our leaders as they expect from us, you will begin to see real progress. With respect to the Ghanaian government giving safe passage, to Charles Taylor, I'm not privy to that information. I was not part of government. I have left in 2001, so I'm not privy to that information. But I'm a firm believer that, one area area that must be addressed, and must be addressed very aggressively on the continent, is the issue of accountability. One hears information such as 35% of Africa's savings is deposited in foreign banks. And who owns the 35%? The number ranges from anywhere from, 100 billion, 200 billion to almost $500 billion. And yet we can't have enough money to loan to the individual entrepreneurs in the country. We have to resort to borrowing. Who owns the money? Which banks are hosting these funds? These are questions that I think, in your capacities as, not to discount the question, that's a very important question with respect to accountability and making sure that people are accounted for their actions. You are in a very prime position to begin to dialogue and ask the question, where is Africa's money deposited? Who owns them? Which bank has them? Were they gainfully earned? And what can be done in terms of repatriating some of these funds back into the economies so that the countries can have the necessary wherewithal to loan? It takes money to build anything. And the total foreign direct investment that comes to the continent is the lowest among the entire region, different regions in the world. Less than 1% of somewhere around $4 trillion ever come to Africa. And that's why the country has huge debt, because we resort to borrowing rather than using investment to grow the economies. So these are issues that once we begin talking about accountability issues among leadership, then you are in a very prime position because of what President Clinton stood for. His incredible love for Africa. That it's an area that must begin to have the necessary dialogue. If 35% of the continent's savings happens to be in foreign banks, can we identify which banks have it? Can we identify how much money that is? As I said, the numbers range from anywhere from 150 billion to $500 to $700 billion. And the reason that, we talk about the corruption and the theft, in Africa, it comes oftentimes from over billion. Country gets a loan, they want to build a bridge, they want to build a road, they want to build a school. They give it to someone to build that bridge, to build that school. That individual over invoices. Invariably may not complete the job, or may do a shoddy job. So you have to borrow another money to do another job, to do the same job. And the country's revenues may be underbilled. So, if the continent is so rich with all these resources, and if that much money of the continent is in foreign banks, can we do a research to find out if those monies were gainfully earned, how much of it, and can we engage where these monies are deposited and engage the government of these foreign countries to begin to repatriate some of these monies back to the continent, at the very least, collectively create a fund. If you take just 10% of the least amount of money, you have between $50 to $20 billion. Just 10% of that. And if we decide to just spend that $15 billion in servicing the private sector among our women folk, and I'm not kidding with that, in 5 to 10 years, you will see a real robust growth in African economies. You see a real robust growth. something, perhaps maybe a challenge for you all or individual or collectively to begin to look into. Maybe there's nothing there. Oh, sorry. And then, that's okay. All right. Yeah, call that first.
Good morning, Ambassador. My name is Don Zekas. I'm also a student here at the Clinton School of Public Service.
My apologies. What happened? I hope the camera caught that. Ambassador comes to Clinton Library and spills water.
It's going to be the headlines.
It's going to be the headline. Yeah. Didn't break the glass. I promise I will not do this. Do that again. Yeah. Thank you so very much. Thank you.
Along the lines of accountability, in 2000, the World Health Organization published a report citing Ghana as 153rd in the world's health systems. It indicated that this was due in part to the lack of adequate resources to healthcare in rural areas in Ghana. And furthermore, they say that this was due to the disproportionately high number of unfunded mandates the national government was passing down to the communities, the local communities regarding healthcare in those areas. And I'm wondering, has the national government, to your knowledge, done anything to reconcile these differences regarding passing the responsibility onto the communities due to unfunded mandates, or is this something that is still an issue within the country?
I will respond in this way. Oftentimes when reports are generated, the reports are generated by an independent body, oftentimes definitely not representation from the country, because you don't want the country submitting a report on yourself. But the reports are generated using the yardsticks that one applies to develop a country. When you have resources, where you have both resources in terms of human capital, resources in terms of wealth or money, and infrastructure. An economy of $8 billion, total population in 2000 were probably around 19.4, 20 million people. And you have all kinds of demands on government and government responsibility. A little around 20% of the national budget, maybe something less than that, is made up of grants and aid. And we know how donor fatigue has been rampant in the world. And where you have limited resources and the demands are so great, one can begin to understand, it doesn't excuse it, but one can begin to understand how judiciously a government must apply the resources into health, education, civil liberty issues, women's empowerment, the private sector, infant mortality, a whole myriad of responsibilities that a country must go through. I think within the same breath of coming up with these kinds of reports, which may represent reality on the ground, for which there's no excuse for that, one must also begin to look into what are the challenges the country faces, or the countries in Africa face, with respect to wealth creation at the global scene. As I said, most African countries are what? Agriculture. What we produce, we don't decide what price we get. So now, you're getting about 60% of what you used to get 20 years ago from your cocoa, but then the health demands have not dwindled by 60%. They've increased by maybe twofold. Meanwhile, you have other demands what, in the area of education. Because the people are growing, 45% of the people are under 15 years old. You have to educate them. And if you don't educate them, what do you have? You have a major problem in the cities. So whilst, and it's important to have these kind of reports, but in the same breath, you must challenge the system and say, well, yes, perhaps they allocate a very small percentage of their national, the revenue system in health. Not to mention the rising oil prices. No country in the world is going to sell Ghana, or for that matter, a non-producing oil country, crude oil at the rate of $20 a barrel. No. But aside from even the crude oil issue, which has adverse impact, effect on an economy, what the countries produce for which they sell to the global market. A real effort must be made to really look at what are these countries getting for their product. And if what they're producing is now earning less than what they were getting, a decade ago, 2 decades ago, then you see the disparity. Because microwave ovens that's produced here or in Europe or in Japan or other places have gone up from 10 years ago. They may be better quality, but the products that are sold to African countries the prices have not gone down. Meanwhile, what we produce for the global market, we don't get the fair prices. Not to mention that the countries has to also be made accountable. I make no excuse. I think the countries must be made to be accountable for not having come up with a comprehensive plan to do value added. You must have a value added program to your principal commodities. Initially, it might be difficult because there has to be an incubation period. The learning curve, but you must have a program to add value to sell to the global market. Because as long as you sell in raw materials form and you don't dictate the prices, you cannot expect a higher dollar value for what you produce. And as a result, the demands of social responsibilities that the people demand. Because guess what? In the villages of Ghana, in the villages of Mali, in the villages of South Africa, in the villages of Ethiopia and other places, guess what? They watch CNN like you and I watch CNN. They watch Friends like you and I watch Friends. They watch Cosby like you and I watch Cosby. And guess what? The kids are asking, why can't we get the same thing? So can you imagine the burden that the countries, the governments face? So it's important. And as I said, that's what the challenge I was throwing to all of you. That you begin to take as issues, why are the African countries in the position that they are in now, given all the wealth? What are the responsibilities on the part of the governments at home? What is the proper forum to address these problems to get the best buck for your efforts? And when we begin to address these issues, then the low percentages or the least amount of monies that are spent in areas that you and I know. Because if a mother's child is sick, I tell you, nothing is more important in the world to her other than getting the baby well. If a mother's child is hungry, there's nothing in the world this breaks it down into basic ABC. Not the high-level discussions of indices and different formats. It boils down to basic human interaction, basic human responsibilities. And as a result, if there's not enough medicine in the system, guess what happens to the child? If there's not enough food in the system, guess what happens to the child? And as I said, by virtue of President Clinton going to Ghana, and we were delighted that it was the first country he went to, and I tell you, We put over 800,000 people in front of him. That's why the man loves Ghana. He was in his element. He loved the place. I remember at the luncheon that we had, you know, he was so at home, he was so comfortable that when he finished his plate, he wanted to go for seconds, and of course, you know, you have the servers who are behind and said, "Oh, Mr. President," he said, no, I can do it myself. He got up, went for seconds. He was at home. He felt so comfortable. It was genuine. And I think we have a major responsibility to echo that, to support what, you know, that kind of trend. He came down from what 11th stage into the audience when Secret Service was saying no, because you could tell that he was saying that no, you know, this is too much. He said no. He went in and people were just, I'm sure if they would have probably, you know, taken a string from his shirt, they would have pulled a string from his shirt so that they can go and say, I have a string from Bill Clinton's shirt. 500,000 people at the stadium. And about 400,000 people on either side. Those who couldn't get to the stadium, who couldn't get onto behind the stadium, guess what? They got in canoes and stayed on the ocean because you could see from the ocean. And I'm saying this not only when he went to Ghana, because I'm sure when he went to the African countries, it was the same. But then now the question goes beyond the visits. It goes beyond the pleasantries into asking those critical questions that says that what are the economies doing? Certainly the countries are doing the best they can given the circumstances. But you have to delve more into it and create a forum to make sure that the right things are done for the good of the people. So we don't have situations where, you know, the limited resources make sure that on the research that is done, which may attest to what the problems are, which may attest to reality on the ground, that reality can be changed, and it must be changed, but it can only be changed through fair trade, through programs that will have a fair playing field for the countries in the developing countries, in the developing world, including my country. Yes.
Good morning, Ambassador. My name is Amy Hill. I'm an undergrad student at UALR. I have a two-part question. The first part is, as a former undergrad student at UALR, I wondered if you could share some of your own personal information, how you got from there to where you're at now. The second part of my question is, building on a question you already had as far as the military in Ghana. What branches have you spoken into, if there's mandatory registration, and if there's a draft in place?
Okay. Let me take the second one, and then I'll come back to the first one. In our system, the military is voluntary. People go into the military, and of course you have to go through a very rigid, qualification program, whether it's an enlisted, individual in an officer's, program, which oftentimes either comes from people who have finished university in the officers program, and for those with the enlisted, soldiers, you still have to go through a qualification program. I don't know the exact qualifications that are meant, but we don't have a draft. We've never had a draft. And during the military rule, the military basically became the the voices for the people. Military rules are not the form of government that countries must adhere to. They may come in for a reason because of corruption, because of a strong man, one man, ruler who may think that the country belongs to him. For that matter, there are no opposition to him, and the military may be the only entity or the only part of the system of government, of the part of the system in a country by virtue of carrying arms that can come in and overthrow the government. It doesn't excuse, I do not approve of military takeovers, because military takeovers always end up costing the country more than it benefits the country. I mean, statistics have shown that. I think the ballot box is the only way, is the proper way for government to be either booted out or maintained in power. But our military has always been, voluntarily, that you go in. I'm glad to, let me add this to it, I'm delighted to know that in Africa now, the mandate of the new African Union is saying that no country that assumes power at the barrel of the gun will be supported by African countries. It is not a proper way to achieve control of government and people. It only breeds fear, and oftentimes they have the discipline, but the discipline is not coupled with the necessary know-how in really governing. And as a result, I don't believe that and I completely agree with what the AU is saying, that no government in Africa that comes in at the barrel of the gun must be allowed to be in power. Now, to the second question, my life in Little Rock, at ULM, I tell you, it is memorable. I had, how many of you are coming to the award ceremony tonight? Only one person. I'd love to invite all of you. It's tonight at the Alumni Center. I think it's only $30. I'd love to have, there's plenty of room. I would love to have all of you. But you can imagine coming from Ghana, where the weather was 80 degrees, 90 degrees, sometimes 100 degrees, coming to Los Angeles with big lights and all of that, and then moving from Los Angeles to Arkansas. My initial impression was, wow, where am I going to? From the plane, because you used to see in New York, before you landed, you used to see in Los Angeles, before the plane landed, and you used to see what you saw in Los Angeles. But I tell you, the life I spent, the 10 years I spent in Little Rock, and the 4 years that I spent at ULM, those were the most memorable years in my entire life. We had, the Dean of Students was Henry Akins, who took personal interest in the foreign students. I eventually became part of the Student Governing Board, the Student Representative Board, ran and became a member. The challenges were, one, the weather. And I wasn't used to it, but it was also a challenge of, we're talking 1975. I remember the first time I tried to rent a house, I went there and the lady wouldn't rent the house to me. And it was shocking to me because I had just called her and she said the house was available, which was about a block or two away from campus because I wanted to be closer to campus. I was on 18th and Vine, I think in that area where I was living, and I wanted to move closer to campus. When then the lady said, as soon as she saw me, she said, "Oh, sorry, house is rented." It was only 20 minutes ago. But the subsequent days and the years that I spent in Little Rock, I met so many wonderful people who molded me. My college professors, they would take the time and sometimes invite me to their home. And we just sit down and we talk about the culture and the differences. How do we talk about the work, about the schoolwork? But basic interest in my culture. Oftentimes I invite some of them to my home, my apartment, and I'll cook Ghanaian dishes for them, which was interesting, for them, both black professors and white professors. To bring them to my home, my apartment, to eat dinner. And I strongly believe that the relationship that I created, that I had here in Little Rock, when I went to Washington as ambassador, I run into the same people, both black and white. And I always credit my accomplishments. Or at a certain time, and I'm not just saying that just to be vain, but we did more at the Embassy of Ghana than most embassies. In 1998, the U.S. Exim Bank supported $50 million worth of businesses in Africa, in the private sector. I came in October 97. In 1999, I literally took up office at the U.S. Exim Bank. And they did $550 million. In 2000, U.S. Exim Bank did $980 million, from $52 billion. And in 1999 and the year 2000, 63% of all funded projects by U.S. Exim Bank went to my country. I had Gloria Kidd, who was a former legislator here, who was an executive at U.S. Exim Bank. We connected very well. I had a gentleman who was my client when I was in Los Angeles at a tax business. It was a U.S. Exim Bank. I had individuals at Agriculture Department, I had individuals at Transportation Department, we know. So then what became the Transportation Secretary, his Chief of Staff and I went to school together. And we knew each other. And I was able to sign the single most effective bilateral air transport agreement between Ghana and the US, better than any other African country, including South Africa, at the time when the agreement was signed. So my time here and the people that I met, that's why it's humbling. When the mayor came and gave me the key to the city, I had goosebumps. Because never in my wildest imagination did I ever imagine that the time I spent here and the people that I met, that somewhere down the line, I was going to run into them again and they were going to make a difference in my life. And I honestly credit my successes at the embassy, and we did a lot. With the countless friends I had in Little Rock, and for that matter, at ULA. Because we would sit sometimes and we talk about some of the fraternity parties that we went to. We talk about, the hangout at the club by the waterfront. Somebody was telling me yesterday, I've forgotten. It's off Cantrell. Cage's Walk. I remember when some of the before the hip hop years, when the soul music and all those kids, it was a place that you could go and little dance until you were so sweaty, I decided only to try and find a way to go to work the next day. These were fun times, and I cherished them. That's why the city is so important. But then most importantly, you become ambassador at a time when the native son of the state that you lived in is the president of the U.S. Talk about destiny. It doesn't get any better than that. And as a result, I remember when I presented my credentials to the president, to President Clinton, he immediately said, "How come? Why did I miss you?" And then he said, "I'm going to call your president and tell him that he has my ambassador." Wait, it's enough to make you humble. It's enough to make you humble. And this city and this school will always be very close to my heart. As I was telling the mayor, the receptibility that I've had from him today, I will do everything possible to have him visit my country, to lead the business community out here, to do business in my country, and of course, other African countries. But I have a very strong umbilical cord, that ties me to the city and ULR. And for that matter, anyone associated with these two entities become a very special person in my heart. So one more?
Well, we were gonna, one more question?
Okay, yeah, because I think the time is up.
Yeah, enough time.
Yeah.
One more, go ahead.
Good afternoon, Ambassador. My name is Adam Nelson. I'm a student at UALR. After reading about Ghana, I was just kind of curious if you could briefly describe the Ashanti region for me and what measures maybe the country is doing to safeguard the Ashanti from being victim.
Okay. It is by far, the wealth of Ghana comes from the Ashanti region. But not only that, they are a group of, it's a tribe. The Ashanti tribe, just like you have the Fanti tribe, the Ashantis are in the middle of the country. And the Fantis are in the south, more in the middle south, which borders the ocean. In the east you have the Evers, and then you have the Gans. Then in the west you have the Nzimas. In the north you have the Hausas, and then you have the Bronx to the east of the Ashantis, to the west of the Ashantis. History teaches us that they were the only group of people or tribe that the British, in the colonial days, could never defeat. And Ghana has several royal houses, royal families, kings, chiefs, that play prominent role in the day-to-day lives of the people, rich in culture, very rich in culture. And the Ashanti tribe has one of the richest cultures in the country. The king of Ashanti is probably by far the most well-known in the country. And they have rituals that is so incredible that when you have a Durbar, for instance, of chiefs in the Ashanti region, you see the kente cloth. The kente cloth that we see, which is a national symbol, actually comes from the Ashanti region. I'm a Fanti, but in my opinion, if you to build a cohesive nation, you have to be able to admire and bring all the people together. It's challenging, but you have to strive to do that. Gold primarily comes from the Ashanti region, even though gold is now being found in the western region, in parts of the central region, and in the northern region. And they've maintained, just like the other ethnic groups, Fantis, Gans, Evers, Hausas, the Bronx, they've maintained their rich culture. It is, history teaches us that one of the custodial of the Ashanti stew commanded a sword to fall from heaven. They have a stew, which in effect is the throne of the Ashanti chief. It is supposed to be the embodiment of the people of Ashanti. And as I said, they've maintained that rich culture just like the other tribes have. But they have accentuated theirs more by virtue of what they have. And certainly, people who go to Ghana try to make it to the capital of the Ashanti region, which is Kumasi, which is about 3.5 hour drive from Accra. And indeed, the roads are very excellent, going from Accra, or for that matter, even going from Cape Coast, from further or far east, to the Ashanti region.
Thank you very much.
mentioned that Bill Clinton ate the food and the food was wonderful.
Yes.
And we were talking about groundnut stew a little bit earlier. However, the hottest food I've ever had, ever, is the main food.
Yes.
And you had to tone that food down.
No.
for him. The second thing is, when I went over there, my wife got her master's degree at Ghana Legon through a combination of schools here and there. But some of you guys may think about there are some excellent graduate institutions there. Cape Coast, that was mentioned just recently, Kumasi, Ghana Legon, all are just wonderful. I don't know if there are other institutions
Yes.
there now.
We've opened a medical school in the north, and also have a teaching university in Winnipeg. And then also there's opportunity now, there are about 2 or 3 private universities that have opened up in Ghana. That's how open the country is now. If you have the money, you come in, you apply, you can start a university.
Anyway, thank you very much on behalf of the Clinton School. It was a wonderful